The hotel dining room in Harlan, Colorado held 12 tables, and on Sunday mornings it was full by 8:30. Margaret Voss had been eating at the corner table by the east window for 6 weeks running, and in 6 weeks no one had once asked to join her. That was fine. She had not come to be joined. She had come because the hotel served a hot breakfast for 30 cents, and because her room above the feed store did not have a stove, and because sitting in a public room with other people moving around her was easier, most mornings, than sitting alone in a room that was only quiet. She was 34 years old and she had been divorced for 4 months, which in Harlan in 1889 was a thing people noticed the way they noticed a crack in a church window. They did not mention it directly. They simply arranged themselves around it. The women at the dry goods counter found reasons to finish their transactions before she reached the front. The Reverend's wife smiled at her from across the street with a smile that had traveled a long distance to get there and arrived tired. The men at the feed store spoke to her with a careful neutrality that was its own kind of verdict. She had been born Margaret Alden Pryor in a county home in New Mexico Territory, had worked from the age of 9, had married Thomas Voss at 22 because he was steady and had land, and because she had been tired of being nobodies. He was not cruel. He was not a drinker. He had simply found, after 11 years, a woman in Pueblo who suited him better, and he had gone to her with a directness that Margaret almost respected, and the court in Denver had granted the dissolution in March, and she had taken nothing from it but her clothes and her mother's recipe box, which had not been her mother's at all, but a woman at the county home who had been kind to her once and left it behind when she died. The recipe box was cedar, small enough to fit in a coat pocket, and she kept it on the windowsill of her room above the feed store. She had no use for most of the recipes. She had no kitchen. But she kept it where she could see it. On the Sunday that things changed, she was eating her eggs and reading the week-old newspaper she'd borrowed from the hotel desk when she became aware of a presence beside her table. She looked up. The man standing there was tall in the way that comes from working, not from birth. He had a carpenter's hands, broad across the knuckle, and a face that had been in the weather long enough to have opinions about it. He held his hat at his side. He was looking at her table and then at the room, which was full, and then back at her table, which had one empty chair. He said, "Every other table's taken. I'd be obliged if I could sit." It was not a command. It was not a performance of courtesy. It was the way you speak to someone you expect to give you an honest answer. Margaret looked at the room. It was true. She looked back at him. "Sit," she said. He sat. He ordered coffee and eggs and did not speak to her again for the duration of the meal except to say, when the waitress brought the wrong toast, "That's fine," and when he stood to leave, "Thank you for the table." He set his coins down, put his hat on, and walked out. The waitress, a girl named Dora with opinions about everything, watched him go and then looked at Margaret. "That's Cal Briggs," she said. "He has the ranch out past the Dunmore Road. Lost his wife 2 winters ago. He comes in Sundays." Margaret said, and returned to her newspaper. But she had noticed, in the way she noticed most things and said nothing about, that he had not once looked at her the way the town looked at her. He had looked at the chair. He had needed a place to sit. He had sat. It was so ordinary that it stayed with her the rest of the day, the way ordinary things sometimes do when you have been a long time without them. The following Sunday he came in at the same time. Every table was full again except hers, which had the one empty chair. He stood at the edge of the room, hat in hand, and she watched him survey it. Then she watched him look at her table and then at her, and she gave a small nod before he could ask, and he came over and sat down. They ate in silence for a while. Then he said, without looking up from his plate, "You're the woman from the feed store rooms." "I am," she said. "You cook." She looked at him. "I can. Why?" He set his fork down and looked at her directly for the first time. His eyes were a plain gray-brown, the color of creek water in November. "I have 2 children and a ranch, and no one to cook or keep the house since my sister went back to Kansas in the fall. I'm offering a position, room and board and a wage, separate room, proper arrangement. I'm not offering anything else." Margaret held his gaze for a moment. She had heard offers before that said one thing and meant another. This one did not feel like that. It felt like a man who was tired and had decided to stop being too proud to say so. "How old are the children?" she said. "Nora is 8. Henry is 5. "What happened to your wife?" "Fever, 2nd winter." She looked out the east window. The street was quiet, the Sunday quiet that felt different from other quiet. A dog was sleeping in a patch of thin November sun on the boardwalk across the way. "I'll need to see the place before I decide," she said. "That's fair," he said. He drove her out the following Tuesday in the wagon. The ranch sat in a fold of the valley where two ridges came together and made a windbreak on the north side. The house was a solid 2-story frame house, plain and unpainted, with a porch that needed one board replaced, and a kitchen that was large and had a good iron stove and a window over the basin that looked toward the eastern ridge. The separate room was off the kitchen, small and clean, with a window and a peg for clothes and a bedstead with a proper mattress. She stood in it for a moment and looked at the window. "All right," she said. "All right," he said. She moved her things out to the ranch on a Thursday. Her things were not many: the clothes, the recipe box, a book, a spare pair of boots. She carried them in herself. Cal Briggs stood on the porch and did not offer to help and did not offer in a pointed way. He simply stood and watched the yard and let her do what she needed to do, which she appreciated more than she could have explained. The children watched her from the doorway. Henry, the 5-year-old, had a wide face and his father's coloring, and he looked at her with the frank assessment of the very young, the kind that has no cruelty in it because it has no strategy in it either. Nora was another matter. Nora stood slightly behind the doorframe, which put her half in the house and half out, and her expression was the expression of a child who has already decided that hope is something you ration. Margaret said, "Hello, Nora." "Hello, Henry." Henry said, "Do you know how to make biscuits?" "I do," Margaret said. "Our last one burned them," he said. "Henry," his father said. "Burnt beans are a serious matter," Margaret said. "I don't take them lightly." The corner of Cal Briggs's mouth moved once and returned to where it had been. Henry looked satisfied. Nora said nothing and went back inside. That first week was work, plain and comprehensive. The kitchen had been managed badly for months, not from cruelty, but from the particular disorder that sets in when someone capable leaves and no one remaining knows quite where things belong. Margaret sorted it without comment. She established where things went and put them there, and they stayed there. She found the larder low on several things and made a list and gave it to Cal without ceremony, and he took it to town the next day and brought back what was on it, including 2 things she hadn't listed that he'd thought of himself: a good bolt of cotton flannel and a tin of baking powder, and he set them on the kitchen table without explanation. She put them away without comment. Nothing was said about either of them. The cooking was not complicated, but it was consistent, and consistency, she had learned, was what a household ran on. Hot breakfast before the hands went out, a proper dinner at midday when they came in, supper in the evening, plain but sufficient. She baked on Tuesdays and Fridays. The bread was good. The biscuits were not burned. By the end of the first week, Henry had appointed himself her assistant in the kitchen, which meant he sat on the flour barrel and narrated events while she worked, and she listened and answered and did not find it tiresome. Nora she did not press. She gave her tasks that had clear outcomes and said thank you when they were done and did not make conversation beyond what the task required. She noticed that Nora was reading above her age and left a book on the kitchen table one morning, a novel she had finished, without saying it was for her. It was gone by afternoon. Nothing was said. Cal Briggs came in for meals and ate and went back out. He was not unfriendly. He was simply a man who had arranged himself around the absence of someone and had not yet rearranged, and Margaret understood that. She did not try to fill the space his wife had left. She made her own space, which was adjacent to it, and kept her own counsel. The ranch hands, 2 of them, a weathered man named Ott and a younger one named Denny, were wary of her the first week in the way that men are wary of a change in routine. By the second week, Ott had started leaving his coffee cup on the kitchen windowsill in the mornings, which was his way of indicating he wanted a second pour without having to ask, and she poured it without making anything of it. And by the third week, Denny had started taking the hotel dining room in Callow Creek held 12 tables, and on Sunday mornings it filled by 8:30 with the same people it always filled with: ranchers and merchants and their wives. The doctor, the school teacher, the widow Farnsworth who came for the eggs because she said her own chickens had given up on her. It was the kind of room that noticed things, that stored them up the way a root cellar stores apples, and what it had been storing up for the past 3 Sundays was the sight of Nora Vass eating alone at the corner table by the window. She was not hiding. That was the first thing people noticed, and the thing they could not quite make sense of. A woman in her position, they said, meaning a woman whose husband had stood up in the county clerk's office 6 weeks prior and declared the marriage dissolved on grounds of her alleged inability to manage a household to his satisfaction, which everyone in Callow Creek understood to mean that Franklin Vass had found a younger woman in Harlan County and needed a reason that faced forward. A woman in her position, they said, might have the decency to stay home. Nora Vass did not stay home. She came to the hotel dining room every Sunday at 8 o'clock, sat at the corner table, ordered coffee and whatever the kitchen was running for eggs, and ate with her back straight and her chin level in the way of a woman who has decided in advance not to fall apart. She had come to Callow Creek 4 years ago as Franklin's wife, arriving from the east with a single trunk and a recipe box that had belonged to her mother. Before Franklin, there had been a childhood in a church home in Missouri, which is a polite way of saying an orphanage, and before that there had been parents she did not remember clearly enough to mourn specifically, only in general, the way you mourn whether you never got to stand in. She had learned to cook in that church home, learned to keep accounts, learned to stretch a pound of flour into something that fed 12. She had brought those skills to Franklin's house and used them faithfully for 4 years, and Franklin had thanked her by filing papers and moving on. She did not discuss this with anyone in Callow Creek. When Mabel Greer, who ran the dry goods and had a voice built for distance, asked her directly one afternoon how she was managing, Nora had said she was managing fine, thank you, and bought her flour and left. She was not rude. She was simply not available for that particular conversation. The fourth Sunday she came in at 8 o'clock as usual, and the table by the window was taken. A family from out of town, 3 children and a grandmother, had settled there with the comfortable permanence of people who did not know it was anyone's table. Nora stood in the entrance of the dining room for a moment, not long, just long enough for the room to notice her noticing, and then she looked for somewhere else to sit. The only open table was a small one near the back, set for 2, and it was not open. A man was sitting at it. He was not eating yet, just sitting with his coffee. A big man in a clean shirt that had been ironed by someone who took the work seriously, with the kind of hands you get from 30 years of working land, scarred across the knuckles and square at the palm. He had dark hair going gray at the temples, and a face that had been outside in all seasons for long enough that the seasons had left a record. He was looking at her. She looked back, the way you do when you are trying to determine if a situation requires action. He pulled the second chair out from his table. Not a gesture exactly, more like a fact he was making available. She crossed the room and stood beside it. "I don't want to impose," she said. "You're not," he said. "Sit down, Mrs. Vass." "Munschund her moan." She sat. The room, which had been watching, returned to its food with the slightly disappointed air of people who had been hoping for more. His name was Cade Hollis. She knew him the way everyone in Callow Creek knew everyone, by sight and by association, the way you know a landmark. He ran a cattle operation 6 miles north of town on land his father had broken and his father's father had scouted. He had been a widower for 7 years. He had 2 children, a boy of 12 named Sam and a girl of 8 named June, and he brought them to church on the Sundays he was not out on the range, which was most Sundays. He did not come to the hotel dining room ordinarily. She had not seen him here before. The waitress came. Nora ordered her coffee and her eggs. Cade ordered more coffee and did not appear to be in a hurry about anything. They ate in a silence that was not uncomfortable, which surprised her. The room made its noise around them, and they sat inside it quietly, like 2 people who had agreed on something without discussing it. When the meal was done, he set his cup down and looked at her directly. "I heard you're not working," he said. "I'm looking," she said. "I need someone at the house," he said. "Cooking and keeping. My girl's been doing it and she's 8 years old and it's too much for her. I can pay $12 a month and the room over the kitchen. It's warm enough." She looked at him. He was not looking away. "I'm not a charity case, Mr. Hollis," she said. "I know that," he said. "I need the help. That's the whole of it." She was quiet for a moment, the way you are quiet when you are checking something inside yourself. "I can start Wednesday," she said. "Wednesday's fine," he said. He picked up the bill for both of them, left money on the table, and stood. "I'll come by with the wagon at 7. "I'll be ready," she said. He put on his hat and left. Mabel Greer, at a table near the window, watched him go and then looked at Nora, and Nora looked back at her with an expression that offered nothing, and after a moment Mabel looked away. By the time the frost settled in for good on the surrounding hills, Nora Vass had been at the Hollis Ranch for 9 days, and the house had changed in ways that were easier to feel than to enumerate. She had arrived on Wednesday as promised, with her trunk and her recipe box, and a satchel that held her good dress and her work dress, and a few books she had not been able to leave behind. Cade had carried the trunk up to the room over the kitchen without comment. The room was small, but it had a window that faced east, and a bed with a quilt on it that had been folded with care, which told her someone had thought about her coming. The kitchen was a wreck, not from neglect exactly, but from the particular chaos of people doing their best without the right knowledge. June, who was 8 and serious in the way that 8-year-old girls can be when they have been given too much responsibility, had been making biscuits from a recipe she had memorized from watching her mother. But she had been measuring by eye, and the results had been variable. Sam, who was 12 and suspicious of everything, had been doing the washing up and doing it adequately, which was about the most you could say for it. Nora did not comment on the state of things. She put her recipe box on the shelf above the stove, which was the first place she put anything, and she asked June to show her where everything was kept. June showed her, walking through the kitchen with the gravity of a small official conducting an inspection, and Nora followed and listened and did not suggest that anything was wrong with the arrangement. That first evening, she made a beef stew with the last of the root vegetables from the cellar and a pan of biscuits that came out even and brown. And when she set the pot on the table, Sam looked at it with the expression of someone who had been told not to expect much and was recalibrating. "These are different from June's," he said. "Sam," Cade said. "I just meant they're different," Sam said. "They're made from a different recipe," Nora said. "Your sister's are good too. She's been doing a hard job." June looked at her plate and said nothing, but the set of her shoulders changed slightly. After supper, Cade went out to the barn to check on a horse that had been favoring its left foreleg, and Sam disappeared to his room, and June helped Nora clear the table without being asked. They worked side by side in a quiet that was mostly comfortable, and when the washing up was done, June dried her hands on her apron and looked at Nora with a directness that was startling in a child her age. "Are you going to stay?" she asked. "I'm planning to," Nora said. "Papa's had help before," June said. "They don't usually stay." "I tend to stay where I say I'll stay," Nora said. June considered this with the seriousness it apparently deserved, and then she went to bed, and Nora stood alone in the clean kitchen for a moment, listening to the wind move across the ridge, and then she banked the stove and went upstairs to her room. By the second week, Sam had stopped watching her with quite so much suspicion. It happened not because of anything she said to him, but because of a specific morning when he came in from the barn before school, with a cut across his palm from a wire that had snapped back, and Nora had him sit at the kitchen table without any fuss, and cleaned the cut and wrapped the hand with a firmness that was also a kind of gentleness, the way you close a book you mean to return to. And when she was done, she said, "You'll want to keep that dry for 2 days," and he said, "All right," and that was the whole of it. But something had settled between them that had not been settled before. Cade noticed. He did not say anything about it. He was a man who noticed things and said very little about what he noticed. And Nora was beginning to understand that this was not coldness but its own kind of language, the language of a man who had carried too much for too long, long enough that he had stopped noticing the weight. She noticed things too. She noticed that he came in every evening and washed at the pump before entering the house, even in the cold. She noticed that he always knew where the children were. She noticed that the porch step, the third one from the bottom, had been loose since before she arrived, and that one morning about 2 weeks in she came down to start breakfast and it was not loose anymore. Nothing was said about the step. She said nothing about it either. She had brought her recipe box from the shelf one evening to copy out a bread recipe for June, who had asked to learn, and June had sat beside her at the table while Nora wrote it out in her plain, even hand, and Cade had come in from outside and stood in the doorway for a moment looking at the two of them bent over the paper in the lamplight. And then he had gone to hang up his coat, and whatever had moved across his face in that doorway he set aside and did not return to. Not that evening. It was a Thursday morning, nearly a month after Nora had come to the ranch, and the weather had turned hard overnight. The kind of cold that comes down off the ridge with a purpose and takes the color out of everything before you are ready for it to leave. Nora had been up since 5:30, and the kitchen was warm, and there was coffee on the stove and bread in the oven and a pot of oats keeping low. Sam came down first, as he usually did, and ate standing up because he was 12, and standing up was faster. June came down in her good dress because it was a Thursday, and Thursdays were for some reason June's good dress days, a practice Nora had not questioned. Cade came in from the barn cold and smelling of hay and horses, and he sat at the table and Nora set his coffee in front of him without being asked, because she knew by now how he took it and when he needed it, and he wrapped both hands around the cup and said nothing, and she went back to the stove. June was eating her oats with great concentration when she looked up at Nora with the directness she had inherited from somewhere and said, "Are you our mama now?" It was not a question the way she said it. It was more like a hypothesis she was testing. The kitchen went very still. Sam stopped moving. Cade's hands did not move on his cup. Nora turned from the stove and looked at June with a steadiness that cost her something. "I'm not your mama," she said, quietly and without flinching. "But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Does that do for now?" June thought about it. "Yes," she said, and went back to her oats. Sam left for school shortly after. June left a few minutes behind him. The kitchen was quiet. Nora stood at the counter with her back to the room, and she heard the scrape of Cade's chair, and then she heard him cross to the door, and then he stopped. "Nora," he said. She turned. He was looking at her with something in his face that he was not quite managing to set aside this time. "Thank you," he said, "for what you said to her." "It was the true thing," she said. He held her gaze for a moment longer than was necessary for a practical exchange, and then he put on his coat and went out, and Nora stood in the warm kitchen with the bread in the oven and the wind pressing against the window glass. And she understood, quietly and without announcement, that something had changed, and that it had probably changed some time ago, and she was only now looking at it straight. Word travels in a small town the way weather does, low and fast and ahead of itself, and by the 5th week word had reached Callow Creek that Nora Vass was keeping house at the Hollis Ranch. And Callow Creek had opinions about this, as it had opinions about everything. Most of the opinions were benign, the ordinary curiosity of people whose lives were small enough that other people's arrangements were interesting. But Mabel Greer had a particular kind of opinion, the kind that presents itself as concern, and she shared it widely. She shared it at the dry goods and at the church steps and at the hotel dining room on Sunday mornings, which was where she shared it with Franklin Vass, who had come back through Callow Creek on some business and had stopped in for breakfast. Franklin Vass was not a large man in any sense of the word. He was medium in height, and medium in coloring, and medium in everything except his opinion of himself, which was considerably above medium. He had the particular confidence of a man who had never been seriously contradicted, and he did not take the news of Nora's situation at the Hollis Ranch with the indifference it deserved. He took it with the proprietary irritation of a man who has thrown something away and then noticed that someone else has found it useful. He asked around. He found out what there was to find out, which was that Nora was working as housekeeper and that the arrangement appeared to be a respectable one. And this should have been the end of it, but Franklin Vass was not the kind of man who let things be the end of it. He went to see a lawyer he knew in the county seat and came back with a document that he described to anyone who would listen as proof that Nora had no legal right to certain household items she had taken when she left, specifically her mother's recipe box, which he claimed had been purchased with household funds and was therefore his property. This was not true. The recipe box had belonged to Nora's mother and had come to Nora from the church home when she turned 18, years before she had ever met Franklin Vass. But a document is a document, and Franklin had one, and he drove out to the Hollis Ranch on a Tuesday afternoon with it, and a self-satisfied expression, and knocked on the door. Nora answered it. She looked at him standing on the porch with his paper and his expression, and her face did what she needed it to do, which was nothing. "Franklin," she said. "Nora," he said. He held up the document. "I've come for the recipe box." "That box was my mother's," she said. "The lawyer says different," he said. She looked at the paper. She did not take it from him. She looked at it the way you look at something that is not what it claims to be, with a steadiness that is not quite contempt and not quite pity but contains elements of both. "I'll need some time," she said. "Come back on Saturday." He seemed surprised that she had not argued. He had been prepared for an argument. He said Saturday was fine and drove back to town. And Nora closed the door and stood in the hallway for a moment with her hand on the doorframe, and then she went to find Cade. She told him plainly what had happened. She told him about the recipe box and her mother and the church home and the document. She told it all in one compact sequence without embellishment or self-pity, the way you report a fact that needs to be dealt with. Cade listened without interrupting. When she was done, he was quiet for a moment. "Do you have anything that proves the box was your mother's?" he said. "There's a name scratched inside the lid," she said. "Clara Marsh. That was my mother's name before she married." "Then we'll need someone who can read a document," he said. "I'll go see Alderman in the morning." Alderman was the county's notary and the closest thing Callow Creek had to a lawyer of its own. He was a careful man with a careful mind, and he did not like documents that were not what they claimed to be. "All right," she said. He looked at her for a moment. "He's not going to take it," he said. "Not a comfort, exactly. More like a statement of what was going to happen." "I know," she said. And then, because it was true and she trusted him enough to say true things, "I'm tired of him having any say in anything that belongs to me." Cade nodded once. "Saturday," he said. "I'll be here." Saturday came cold and bright, the kind of winter morning that is beautiful in the way that things are beautiful when they do not care whether you find them so. Franklin Vass arrived at 10 o'clock with his document and a man from town who he had apparently brought as a witness, which told Nora he had expected this to be a scene worth witnessing. What he had not expected was Cade Hollis standing in the front room, or Alderman sitting at the table with his glasses on and a second document in front of him. Or the fact that the second document was a certified statement from the church home in Missouri confirming that one recipe box, cedar, with the name Clara Marsh scratched inside the lid, had been given to Nora Marsh upon her departure in the year of her 18th birthday, which was 11 years before she had married Franklin Vass. Franklin looked at the document. He looked at Alderman. He looked at Cade, who was standing with his arms at his sides and his expression entirely still, the way a man stands when he has decided exactly what he will and will not do and is waiting to see which one becomes necessary. "This is her employer," Franklin said, with a particular emphasis on the word that was meant to mean something else. "I'm aware of who he is," Alderman said pleasantly. "The document stands regardless." Franklin looked at Nora. She looked back at him with nothing on her face that he could use. He took his document and left. His witness followed him. The sound of the wagon going back down the road was the only sound for a moment, and then June's voice came from the top of the stairs, where she had been listening with the complete lack of subtlety of an 8-year-old who has decided that something important is happening. "Is he gone?" she said. "He's gone," Cade said. "Good," said June, and went back to her room. Alderman gathered his papers and shook Cade's hand and nodded to Nora with a respect that was genuine and left. And then it was just the two of them in the front room, and the recipe box was still on its shelf in the kitchen where it had always been, and the morning light was coming through the window at a low winter angle that laid itself across the floor in a long pale stripe. "Thank you," she said, "for the trouble." "It wasn't trouble," he said. She looked at him. He was looking back at her with the same expression she had seen in the doorway on the morning of June's question, the one he had not quite managed to set aside. "Cade," she said. "I know," he said, "not now. But I want you to know that I'm not going to pretend I don't know." She held his gaze. "All right," she said. And that was where they left it, for a while. The thing about Franklin Vass was that he did not give up cleanly. A man who gives up cleanly accepts that he is lost and moves on, which requires a kind of self-knowledge that Franklin did not have. What he did instead was talk, and he talked in the places where talk did the most damage. At the hotel dining room on Sunday mornings, and at the dry goods counter where Mabel Greer received information like a post office and distributed it with similar efficiency. What he said was not quite a lie and not quite the truth, which is the most effective kind of thing to say if your aim is damage. He said that Nora had always been a difficult woman, that she had never managed his house to a proper standard, that he had done her a kindness in releasing her from a situation that had not suited her, and that her current arrangement, with the particular weight he gave the word, spoke for itself. Mabel Greer added to this what Mabel Greer always added, which was the architecture of implication, the raised eyebrow, the significant pause, the question asked in a tone that contained its own answer. By the third Sunday of this campaign, the hotel dining room had sorted itself into two camps. The people who thought Nora Vass was a woman who had made the best of a hard situation and deserved to be left alone, and the people who thought the situation required more scrutiny than it was getting. Nora heard about it the way she heard about most things, through the specific silence that falls when you walk into a room where you have just been discussed. She did not alter her behavior. She came to church on the Sundays she came, sat in the pew she sat in, spoke to the people who spoke to her, and did not explain herself to anyone. Cade heard about it too. and what he heard made him quiet in a way that was different from his usual quiet. A quiet with something underneath it that had not resolved itself into action yet but was working in that direction. It was the fourth Sunday of this that the thing happened in the hotel dining room that Callow Creek would discuss for the better part of a year afterward. Nora had come in at 8 o'clock, as she had done every Sunday since the beginning. The corner table by the window was open, the family from out of town long gone, and she sat there and ordered her coffee and waited for her eggs. The room was full. Franklin Vass was at a table near the center with two men from the county seat who were apparently involved in some business venture, and he saw her come in and made a remark to his companions in a voice that was not quite low enough, something about women who knew how to make themselves comfortable at other people's expense. The room heard it. The room always heard things like that. It held its breath in the way that rooms do when they are deciding whether something is going to happen. Cade Hollis came through the door at 8:15. He was not a man who came to the hotel dining room on Sundays. He had come twice now, and both times had been notable, and the room registered his arrival with the attention it deserved. He crossed to the corner table. He did not look at Franklin Vass. He pulled out the chair across from Nora and sat down. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she said. The waitress came. He ordered coffee. He did not appear to be in any particular hurry. Franklin Vass said something else to his companions, louder this time, about the entertainment value of watching people who should know better make decisions that the whole town could see. Cade set his cup down. He turned in his chair and looked at Franklin Vass with a directness that was not anger, exactly, but was related to it the way a river is related to the rain that fills it, composed of many quiet days. "Franklin," he said. His voice was not raised. It did not need to be. The room had gone entirely still. "You had something worth having and you threw it away because you were a fool and a coward, and that's your business. But you don't get to keep talking about it. Not in this room, not in this town. You're done with that." Franklin Vass opened his mouth. "You're done," Cade said again, the same tone, the same quiet, and something in it closed the subject the way a door closes, not slammed, just shut. The room held its breath for one more moment. Then someone at a table near the back resumed a conversation. And then someone else did, and the room came back to itself in the way rooms do when the thing that was going to happen has happened and they can go back to their eggs. Franklin Vass did not finish his breakfast. He left money on the table and left, and his companions from the county seat followed him, and the door closed behind them, and Mabel Greer at her table by the window looked at Nora and then looked at her plate and did not look up again for some time. Cade turned back to his coffee. Nora looked at him. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," he said. "I was managing," she said. "I know that too," he said. "I wasn't doing it because you couldn't. I was doing it because I wanted to." She was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, the street was going about its Sunday business. Horses at the rail, a child running past with a hoop, the ordinary world carrying on. "All right," she said. They finished their breakfast. He paid the bill, as he had the first time, and they went out together into the cold, bright Sunday morning, and the town watched them go and stored it up for later. He drove her back to the ranch in the wagon, and they rode the 6 miles without much talk, which was not unusual for them and did not feel like anything was missing. The children were with the neighboring family for the morning, as they sometimes were on Sundays, and the ranch was quiet when they arrived. She went in and started the stove for the midday meal, and he came in behind her and stood in the kitchen doorway in the way he sometimes stood in doorways, as if he was not sure yet whether the room was going to let him in. "Nora," he said. She turned from the stove. He was looking at her with nothing set aside this time, nothing managed or deferred. "I've been thinking about how to say this right," he said. "I don't know that there's a right way, so I'm going to say it plain." She waited. "I want you to stay," he said. "Not as the housekeeper, permanent. As my wife, if that's what you'd want. I'm not asking you to decide anything today. I'm not asking you to decide anything until you're ready and sure. You can have all the time you need, and if the answer is no, I'll understand it and we won't speak of it again, and you'll have a place here as long as you want one regardless." He stopped. He had said the whole of it, and he stood with it said, not filling the silence with anything else. She looked at him. She looked at his hands and his face and the clean shirt that had been ironed by someone who took the work seriously, which she now knew was him because he ironed his own shirts on Saturday evenings at the kitchen table while the children did their reading. She thought about the porch step and the coffee and the morning he had ridden to the county seat and back in one day to get a document that proved her recipe box was hers. She thought about the way he stood in doorways. She thought about the hotel dining room, the first morning, the chair pulled out like a fact made available. "I don't need time," she said. "I've known for a while. I was waiting for you to be ready to say it." The something moved across his face that was not set aside. "Yes," she said. "That's what I want." He crossed the kitchen in 2 steps and took her hands in both of his, and they stood like that in the warm kitchen with the stove ticking and the wind outside and the recipe box on its shelf, and neither of them said anything else because there was nothing else that needed to be said. They were married on a Saturday in late February, in the church, with the children there and aldermen as witness, and about half of Callow Creek in attendance, because Callow Creek was not going to miss this. The ceremony was brief and plain, the way both of them wanted it. June wore her good dress and stood very straight. Sam shook Cade's hand afterward with a formality that made Cade put a hand on the back of his neck for a moment and say something quiet that made Sam nod. Mabel Greer came to the church. She sat in the 3rd row and watched the whole thing with an expression that was not quite warm and not quite cold. And she did not say anything to Nora afterward, but she did not say anything against her either, and in Callow Creek that was as close to an apology as such people generally gave. Franklin Vass did not come back to Callow Creek after the Sunday in the hotel dining room. He had business in other places, apparently, and those places suited him better, and after a while his name came up less and less in conversation, the way the names of people who no longer matter tend to do, until it was just a name that meant nothing in particular, like weather from a season ago. By the time the first thaw came and the fields around the ranch began to show green at the edges, the house had settled into itself in the way that houses do when the right people are in them. Nora had moved her recipe box to the kitchen shelf above the stove, which was where it had always been, but now June knew every recipe in it by heart, or was working toward it. And on Sunday mornings, she and Nora stood side by side at the counter and made the bread together. June's small hands working the dough with a seriousness that Nora recognized from somewhere inside herself. Sam had fixed the latch on the barn door that had been sticking since October, and when Cade pointed out that he hadn't asked him to do it, Sam said he'd noticed it needed doing, and Cade said that was good thinking, and Sam went back to what he was doing, and the latch worked perfectly from then on. The room over the kitchen stood empty now. Nora had moved her things downstairs in February, and the room had been aired and the quilt folded and the window left slightly open to let the spring in when it came. The satchel that had held her good dress and her work dress and her books was on a shelf in the bedroom she shared with Cade, and the books were on the nightstand, and the good dress was in the cedar chest at the foot of the bed, next to a cloth that smelled of cedar and lavender, which had been in the chest when she arrived, and which she had left there because it seemed to belong. The recipe box stayed on its shelf. It had been there through everything, through the church home and Franklin's house and the room over the kitchen, and now here, and it would stay here. June had asked once if she could write her own recipes in the back pages, the blank ones, and Nora had said yes, and June had written 3 so far in a careful rounded hand, biscuits and apple cake, and a remedy for a cough that she had learned from Nora and felt strongly should be preserved. On a Sunday morning in early April, Nora came downstairs to find Cade already at the table with his coffee, which was not unusual, and June at the counter already starting the bread, which was also not unusual, and Sam outside doing the morning chores with the particular efficiency of a boy who has decided to be competent and is becoming it. The kitchen was warm. The light came through the east window at the angle it came through in spring, lower than summer and cleaner, laying itself across the table in a stripe that caught the steam from the coffee cup. Cade looked up when she came in. He did not say anything. He pushed the second cup toward her, the one he had poured and left on the table, and she sat down and wrapped her hands around it and looked out the window at the field beyond, which was showing green at the edges now, the frost retreating toward the ridge where it would hold on a while longer before giving up entirely. "June," Sam's voice came from outside, calling through the open barn door. "There's a lamb." June dropped her dough and ran. Nora started to rise and Cade said, "She's fine," and Nora sat back down, because she knew he was right, because she knew this place and these children and this man, and she knew what was fine and what wasn't, and almost everything this morning was fine. The coffee was good. The bread would rise. Outside, June was exclaiming over the lamb in the voice she saved for things that genuinely astonished her. and Sam was saying something practical about it in the voice he was growing into, the voice of a boy becoming a man who noticed what needed doing and did it. Cade reached across the table and covered her hand with his, briefly, the way you touch something you are glad is there. And then he picked up his cup again and looked out the window, and she looked out the window too, at the green coming in at the edges of the field, at the light that was clean and new and not waiting for anything. The cabin held its warmth, not waiting for anyone, not anymore. And that was the story of Nora Vass, a woman who came to Callow Creek with a trunk and a recipe box and a chin held level, and found in the end that the most ordinary things, a warm kitchen, a repaired step, a chair pulled out like a fact made available, were the ones that lasted. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this one. Thank you.